The Powkiddy V2, yes, it's real, and well, it's an odd duck, isn't it? Full disclosure here, I was sent this for free by online retailer Banggood for this review. They didn't tell me what to say though, and when they approached me, I took one look at this and said, "This looks absolutely hilariously awful, I must give it a go." It's cheap, less than $30 US. It's cheerful. Let's see what it's like. It promises 10 kinds of simulators, or emulators is what I think they mean, and actually that is what you get. The usual suspects for this sort of thing, really: NES, Super NES, etc. Unfortunately, there is no Windows 98 emulation. Why is that logo there? That would have been interesting, and yes, there probably is actually 10,000 games on the included SD card, a cavalcade of what turns out to be really poorly labelled and organised ROMs for the appropriate systems. Let's have a look at the box, shall we? The thing actually looks quite tasteful on the front here, but well, not so much when we get inside. Support controller, well yeah, maybe it does. 11 simulators, well that's a lie, there really is only 10. Connectable TV, well that is unambiguously true actually, and I'll test that out. What's on the back of the box? Nothing interesting really. Let's move on and let's get to opening this thing up, shall we? What do we have inside? We have the thing itself, of course, in its polythene shroud. We also have a USB Type-C cable of, well, I don't know, reasonable quality. That does kind of bode well that this is a USB Type-C compatible device, which is always handy. We also have a really thrilling and I'm sure totally useful warranty card, and an equally thrilling manual in Chinese and thankfully in English too, though it's neither particularly informative about anything nor is it entertainingly badly written. So we'll leave that there, that's all there is inside. Nothing else, no other accessories. So let's look at the unit itself, and wow, it really is just as interesting looking in the flesh as it was in the pictures. Different, striking, unconventionally attractive, you might say, if you were feeling charitable, because well, it's not completely without charm. The red and blue gives it some unabashed pop, and the double arc of buttons is certainly a bold design move. The D-pad and the buttons actually feel pretty good. This definitely could be a playable device. It looks a bit like a prop from a 90s Nickelodeon show, but it might actually work. Let's do the ritual peeling off of the plastic film to reveal a pristine and well, not Gorilla Glass screen beneath. And why not say hello to the cat too? He loves plastic for some reason. I think he likes the noise it makes. Anyway, let's look at the unit in a bit more detail. We have 3 orifices on the bottom, the standard USB Type-C for charging, a regular USB for an external controller, I believe, and a recessed reset switch, which I did end up using at one point when it locked up. And on the top we have a SD card slot with the SD card in it and a very tiny jack, which is the TV out, but more on that later. And on the side we've got the power button and the volume control software buttons, all 3 of them. Let's fire it up and see what's on offer. Now I've got to say here that to get a decent looking recording of the screen, I ended up recording in what looks to be the dark, actually dim natural light, but well, it does mean you can pretty much see the screen quite well. The first issue we have to deal with is the fact that everything is in Chinese by default. Luckily that's fairly easy to sort out. With a bit of guesswork on the menus, it's not hard to get things to a more helpful English. So after a quick flick through of the menu, let's just get to the main event, yes, the games, and we'll start off with a fairly safe bet, the Game Boy. And why not Super Mario Land? And yeah, it looks pretty good. The screen is absolutely fine, it's just a standard definition 240p thing from the specs, but it does the job okay. Is the aspect ratio slightly off? Yes, maybe, but it's not too bad. Is that something we can alter in the settings? No, we can't. But anyway, it plays okay, and the controls feel pretty good here, especially the D-pad. You might take issue with the button layout. Is that something we can change in the settings? Again, that's a no, but so far it's not a huge issue. The Game Boy Color is unsurprisingly pretty much the same story. Games run quite well, totally playable, and graphics look a tad stretched, but it's okay. NES games run pretty nicely too. Is the sound slightly off? Well, I don't know, maybe, but again, this is totally playable and far from the worst NES emulation I have ever seen. Alright, that isn't saying much, is it? But this is a reasonably satisfying NES experience. Moving on to stuff that's a bit more demanding now, the Neo Geo fares pretty well too. The sound is maybe a little scratchy, but mostly this is really okay, not a totally terrible way to play Neo Geo games. The button layout is okay too, which is good because once again, there's nothing you can do about it. When we get to the Mega Drive stroke Genesis, well, a little bit of disquiet sets in. It doesn't seem quite so good. The frame rate seems a bit choppy somehow. I think there are frames being dropped, and well, it's playable, but just slightly off. Yeah, maybe we're starting to hit the limits of this machine. And the button layout really bites here as well. It's just awkward, and there's nothing you can do about it at all. CPS-1 arcade emulation is actually maybe better than the Mega Drive, weirdly. This plays okay. As does CPS-2 as well. How is this better than the Mega Drive? I don't know, but that's what it is. But now this is where things really start to take a dive. The Super NES. It's just not good. It sounds like there's a bee jammed in the speaker grill, and it's unbelievably choppy. I'm not sure how well it will come across in this footage, but it looks really terrible in person. It's getting obvious what's gone on here. This is clearly running a modified RetroArch or something of that ilk, and it's been tweaked until whatever system on a chip this thing has can handle the emulators. To get SNES games working, they've clearly upped the frame skipping and dropped the sample rate until we've got this mess. It's technically working and technically playable, but well, it's really not good, and the button layout is once again absolutely terrible, and yeah, you're just stuck with it. In fact, let's have a quick look at the very sparse setting menu, as it's called. Yeah, you can save and load a single state, which does seem to work, but that's it, that's all you've got. There is another setting menu in the main menu, but that doesn't really help with the controls either, or the aspect ratio whilst we're about it. Looking at Super Mario World here, it doesn't get any better. This is just not great performance. I mean, it is playable, but you wouldn't really want to. What else have we got? Well, there is what's just labelled MAME, which, well, the games that are here seem to run okay again, better than the SNES anyway. What version of MAME is this? I've no idea, it just doesn't say, so good luck getting anything that isn't included on this card to work. MAME ROMs are notoriously finicky, aren't they? But, well, what is here is okay. And the final system on offer is the Game Boy Advance. Surely this just won't be good, will it? Well, it's actually better than the Super NES. The sound still comes across a bit like a hummingbird trying to nest in a kazoo, but it's sort of okay, and we do seem to be dropping a lot less frames. Is this perfect Game Boy Advance emulation? No, far from it. But I could actually envision playing some games this way. I mean, not if you had an actual Game Boy Advance to hand, but I would give this a moderate pass. Right, so let's move on to those TV out capabilities. Does it work? Well, first of all, you're going to need a 2.5mm headphone jack to RCA phono cable, which isn't supplied with the unit. But everybody's got one of those lying around these days, don't they? No, well, luckily I do, so let's plug it in and head to the menu and switch this into the TV out mode. There's a choice of PAL or NTSC. My TV can handle both, and they both appear to be identical to look at, though presumably PAL is 50 frames per second, but who knows. Either way though, this is very much old school analog composite video. And yes, once again, I'm in what appears to be the dark, but hopefully you can get a reasonable idea of what this looks like. And well, do you know what, it doesn't actually look that bad. Unsurprisingly, it's kind of the same as in handheld mode, but, well, just bigger, and maybe the colours are slightly more washed out. NES games look actually quite nice. There's maybe a bit of screen tearing, but not a whole lot, and in the main I would say that in some ways this looks better than a real NES. Even with composite out, original consoles didn't always look that good, and this is actually maybe a little clearer, so not bad overall, a decent way to play NES games. Neo Geo is the same story. It seems okay, quite playable, maybe not perfect, but I would say you could have a half decent play session with this. Moving on to the Super NES, well, things are no better here than they were in handheld mode. I tried out a few of the more demanding SNES games to see what would happen, and well, that really wasn't going anywhere. Anything using the Super FX just won't work. Yoshi's Island crashes in the intro, and Star Fox is the same story. Less intensive stuff, well, it does work, but you don't really want to be playing SNES games like this. Though if you do want to play Yoshi's Island, the Game Boy Advance version works just fine, not perfectly, but you could play this, sort of. If I was inexplicably trapped on a desert island with only a Samsung TV and a Powkiddy V2 for company, this classic would be a decent way to pass the time. So there we have it. In the end, that is the Powkiddy V2, a rather cheap handheld that somebody sent me. I was expecting to hate this, I really was. I thought it would be an amusingly, entertainingly awful thing for me to do a fun review of, but actually it's somehow kind of won me over for reasons I can't really articulate very well. So much so that I'm disappointed that it's not just a bit better. The screen is fine, the build quality seems okay, the battery life seems about good enough. It claims to have 3 hours playtime, which might be a bit ambitious, but it's okay. The selection of games that's on there is a little strange and well, not organised in any remotely sensible way, but that's something you could fairly easily fix if you wanted to, and it does seem to have actually a genuine 32GB SD card, so there is plenty of storage space. The D-pad and the buttons themselves really feel okay. I thought they would be awful and cheap, but it's totally usable. The problem is how the buttons are mapped to the original system inputs. It seems to be totally arbitrary and you just can't change them. It runs 8-bit systems okay, and even the Neo Geo okay, but well, the SNES was terrible and the GBA was passable, but only just. It's a shame it's not more configurable and tweakable. It's a shame that there's maybe not more suitable emulators loaded on this thing as well. Master System, MSX, they could have worked. Some of these new retro-focused portables do have alternative firmwares you can load in, giving you much more in the way of customizable features, but not this yet, and maybe not ever. It does tend to be the slightly higher end and more popular consoles that get this treatment, and unless this thing really strikes a chord, it probably won't ever see anything like that. There are some other features that this thing has that I haven't talked about. I didn't really bother with them, but you can listen to MP3s and watch videos if you really want. For some reason it's supplied with a video file of what appears to be some kind of Chinese news reports, but well, I'm going to play this but with the sound off because I really don't want to get content matched for that. But that's not what this thing is really about, it's the games in the end, and well, It's not amazing, but somehow I can't totally hate it. I don't know, somehow it's just goofily endearing, and well, it is darn cheap. £22 to you, sir, from Banggood, plus shipping, which doesn't seem to be that much, or $30 or around €27. And yes, the controller input, that's what the other USB port is supposed to be for, isn't it? Well, disappointingly, it seems like I don't have a compatible controller to try it with. Nothing happens with the Xbox 360 wired controller I have lying around, and this rather nice iBuffalo SNES pad that I've got almost worked, but not all the buttons were recognised. Even if this had have worked out, the controller input only works for player 2, and yet it's not configurable, so it wouldn't have been massively useful. More options is what this thing needs. Let me tweak things. Just being able to remap the controls would have added so much to this. So let's prepare to leave this all behind and call this video finished. If you'd like to buy one of these things, maybe as a prop for that Clarissa Explains It All fan remake you're planning, or maybe just because you can't resist its bizarre charms, there is a link below. Do I benefit from you clicking on that? Maybe. They were a bit vague on that, we'll see. So yeah, thanks for watching, thanks as always to my wonderful patrons, it really does make a difference to me, it's a huge help. If you'd like to join them, that would be fantastic, or even just subscribing if you haven't already would be fabulous. So I'll say thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, folks.